Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you till 2 o'clock, and the NBA playoffs start today. You will hear the Spurs and Warriors coming up in about an hour from now. Pre-game coverage starts here on 97.3 ESPN. Then Sixers and the Miami Heat played tonight. Coverage begins for that at 8 o'clock. And joining me now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline is Julian Edlow, DraftKings NBA contributor. You can follow him on Twitter at Julian Edlow. Julian, how you doing on this Saturday?
I'm doing well, Josh. Ready to get this NBA postseason going.
Before we start breaking down the matchups, is there anything that surprises you about the seeding, about how it all laid out? Because we know the Timberwolves, they got in last minute. It took them to get overtime over the Nuggets to get that win. The Wizards dropped all the way down to the AC. So do any of these seedings that we ended up with surprise you at all?
Yeah, I actually thought Denver was going to surprise the Timberwolves there and take that game, but I wouldn't say that surprises me, obviously, to have the home team win that. Timberwolves were obviously a really good team all year and kind of slipped with Jimmy Butler injured there for a while. I don't know if there's all that much that surprises me. We have the Cleveland Cavaliers down at a 4 seed. The Golden State Warriors, we've known for a while, weren't going to get that 1 seed. That was going to be Houston, but those teams being the 2 and 4 seeds is kind of something a little bit different, but I don't know if anything necessarily surprises me in the seeding as much as it was just exciting to watch these seeds play out, particularly in the Western Conference when we had seeds 3 through 8 still all up for grabs on the last night of the regular season.
Before we get to the rest of the matchups, obviously in this area, there's a lot of Sixers fans. We are the home in South Jersey for Sixers basketball here on 97.3 ESPN. The Sixers versus the Heat. One of the things that stands out to me about this matchup, Julian, is the fact that the Miami Heat statistically are one of the top 10 defensive teams in the NBA. They do get a lot of points off of turnovers, while the Sixers are a team that had the most turnovers per game in the NBA this season. So is that kind of something we have to watch out for in this series? Can the Heat's defense take advantage of the Sixers' mistakes?
Yeah, if Miami's going to win that series, that's exactly how it's going to have to be done. They're the more veteran team. They're a team that's, they've been going with that coach, Eric Spoelstra, down there for a while. He's a very well-thought-of coach. So all the talent, even without starting the series without Joel Embiid, the talent is clearly on the 76ers side, and that's going to be great, obviously, when Embiid is able to come back. But Miami is just, they do what they do. They're going to play defense. They're going to be really solid. They don't have a ton of star power. Dwayne Wade is aging. Hassan Whiteside is a guy that's been playing like 20 minutes a game lately. So it's a really an odd combination. Miami is probably the least talented team in the postseason, I would say, just in terms of what they have there. But they're so well coached. They know what they're doing. They're going to have a really good game plan to beat the Sixers. But in the end, talent usually prevails in an NBA series.
It's interesting because the Heat almost made the postseason last year, and you could argue this team might be worse than that team that was last year because this year there is no Dion Waiters. They added Kelly Olynyk, but that's not that huge of a difference. So, to me, this may be a grinded out series. I think the Sixers are going to win. I have obviously picked them, but to me, this could go 6 games, Julian, because I think the Heat could make it difficult. And you mentioned Dwayne Wade. We already saw it twice this season in the 2 wins the Heat had with the Sixers. He came off the bench and had over 20 points.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do like Philly in this series, but it's not going to be easy because it's the first time the Sixers have been here. They're gonna have a lot of learning to do. And Miami, thankfully for Philly, is a team that doesn't have all that much talent, so it's a good team to kind of start doing that learning against. But it comes right back to the same things. That defense, are they going to turn the Sixers over? Look, the Sixers are going to make some mistakes. It's not going to be pretty. I don't think they're going to come out here and just dominate the Heat or sweep the Heat. But in the end, I just think too much talent. They're going to prevail. And, the Sixers have a really nice path lined up potentially to the conference final against Toronto or Cleveland, considering that, the Celtics are nowhere near full strength and Milwaukee's a young team that's kind of learning this on the fly as well as a potential second-round opponent. So the Sixers actually couldn't have asked for a nicer bracket in the East. So, it's their first time there. They've got a lot of learning to do, but there's also a lot of positives there to look at.
Julian Edlow joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN, DraftKings NBA contributor. Before we move on, we mentioned Dwayne Wade a couple times. DraftKings in the postseason, we know that the pickings have to be a little different. You don't have as many guys to choose from on a night-to-night basis. Is a guy like a Dwayne Wade worth making a flyer on, considering the fact that you know that historically, at least in Miami for those two games, he has a history of going off points-wise?
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about this. Your fantasy basketball season is over, but DraftKings is going to have you covered through the entirety of the playoffs. We've got this Saturday slate. It starts at 3 p.m., and we're going to have slates for you, every day throughout the postseason. And it's a totally different game because, rotations tighten up. Veterans like Dwayne Wade, who you mentioned, he's at $4,900 in salary for Saturday's slate. He, in theory, should be playing more minutes. He played 17 minutes in the season finale against Toronto, 24 minutes in the game before that, 19 against the Knicks in the game before that. That's not a lot of minutes, but you can get up double-digit shot attempts per game. So, in theory, a guy like Dwayne Wade should kind of be let loose a little bit here, maybe see 25 to 30 minutes and be very productive, which he's obviously been able to do. You mentioned that against the Philadelphia 76ers. So, yeah, you've got guys like Dwayne Wade. Another similar guy to mention like that is a Pau Gasol for the Spurs. He's hardly been playing any minutes. He's $4,700 on DraftKings. Should, in theory, see a lot more minutes in a faster-paced matchup against the Golden State Warriors in the playoffs. So those are kinds of guys where you look for value come the postseason, whereas in the regular season, we're looking for what guy is going to be resting this night and the backup to play. Well, nobody rests in the playoffs, and you generally play unless you're seriously injured. So there's no more who's in, who's out, where do we capitalize. You got to find the value plays in terms of what type of veteran guys are going to come off the bench or play a bigger role to get you your fantasy points.
Speaking of guys in value with role, from a fantasy basketball perspective, are you wary of a guy like Hassan Whiteside? Because we've seen his minutes diminish at different points during the season, especially when other teams go with smaller lineups. We know the Sixers, at times, they've put out Ersan Ilyasova as a guy to play the 5 to stretch the floor. Is a guy like Ilyasova appealing from a fantasy basketball perspective, and is a guy like Hassan Whiteside someone you put a red flag on?
Yeah, well, starting with Ilyasova, I really think for as long as Joel Embiid is out, your Ilyasova, your Dario Saric, your Rashawn Holmes, those guys are obviously more attractive plays anytime Joel Embiid is not going to be playing in a game. So Ilyasova coming off a poor game in that finale against the Bucks, 18 minutes, 3 points, 3 rebounds. He didn't do much. But the game before that against the Hawks, he had a monster game, 26 points, 8 rebounds. He had 46 points on DraftKings. So I think those guys are in good spots, all those guys I mentioned, until obviously Embiid returns, and then he just becomes a fantasy stud there. In terms of Whiteside, I am a little concerned there, and he's still at $7,200 in salary, so he's kind of expensive, but I've got to think that he gets a little bit more run than he had been getting towards the end of the regular season, and he had still been really productive in 21, 22 minutes. His last couple games of the regular season, he scored 33.35 DraftKings points. That's still pretty good for where he's priced at. So I like Whiteside, and then Embiid is like the key to this whole series. When Embiid comes back, Whiteside kind of just has to see more minutes just to have a body somewhere near the size of Embiid to be out there and contest with him. So Whiteside is a guy that there is some concern there, but I do like him, and I like him more when Embiid comes back.
Let's transition to some of the other Eastern Conference matchups. I know that the Raptors versus Wizards series is a series that a lot of people are identifying as a potential stumbling block for the Raptors. We know the Wizards have played them very well. And to me, I was asked earlier this week, if I had to take the 2 guys of each team, to me, I'm sorry, I would take John Wall and Bradley Beal over a Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, despite the fact that DeRozan has a good season. Is this Raptors-Wizards series a series that could go 6-7 games?
Oh, I definitely think this is going to be a 6 to 7 game series. I do ultimately like Toronto to prevail, but I love your point there. The talent is pretty even, particularly with the top 2 guys. Whether you want to go with Wall and Beal or Lowry and DeRozan, there's no denying that that's essentially a toss-up. So that's not very typical for a 1 versus 8 series to have a scenario like that. So what I think it's going to come down to, and we've been saying it all season, just how good that Toronto bench is. Their second unit has been by far the most efficient second unit in basketball, and one of the most efficient benches that we've seen in a long time. So ultimately, I think that's why Toronto will prevail over Washington in this series. But it's definitely interesting to note that the talent discrepancy between these two teams, there really isn't one. They're pretty evenly matched there in terms of the starters. So Toronto's bench, I think, ultimately gets this done for them, but definitely going to be a fun 1 versus 8.
Moving on to the Bucks versus the Celtics. Obviously, the Celtics, no Kyrie Irving. He's done for the rest of the season. But I think people overlook the fact that this is still a Celtics team that plays very good defense. They've gotten great contributions from Marcus Morris and Terry Rozier. Jason Tatum's having a great year. Brown's playing very well. I look at this Celtics team, and I think this is a team that can still make life difficult for people. And the Bucks are a team that they have a lot of talent, but this may not be the best matchup for them.
Yeah, this is probably the series that I struggle with the most to pick. And I mean, I'm a Boston guy. I've been watching this Celtics team kind of grind through everything all season. And every time you think that they're down, they still kind of find a way to prevail. They're a tough team. They have a fantastic coach. But I mean, I keep talking about talent in the NBA playoffs. Milwaukee is talented. Giannis Antetokounmpo, nobody has an answer for him. You've got Chris Middleton there. You've got Eric Bledsoe there. And all of a sudden, Jabari Parker is looking pretty healthy and playing pretty well for them. So that's a lot of talent. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Milwaukee pulled out the upset here in 6 games. At the same time, this Celtics team always wins when you think that they are not going to win. They've got the type of bodies to do it. Marcus Morris, you mentioned, playing well. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Let's see what they're made of in this postseason as two really young, promising players. Al Horford provides that veteran leadership for you, and then the emergence of Terry Rozier. Marcus Smart obviously won't be there to begin with, but there's a chance if this were to go to a Game 6, Game 7, that Smart could get out on the floor and give the Celtics some kind of boost. So this is a tough series. I want to see a little bit of it play out to be more comfortable with my stance on the series, but it wouldn't surprise me either way on this one.
Assuming the Sixers beat the Miami Heat, I'm looking at the Sixers' path to the conference finals, and I think they're going to get there. But you look at the Heat, you look at the Celtics, you look at the Bucks. These are all teams that can give some defensive issues for the 76ers because of their turnover problems. And I think while the Sixers may get to the Eastern Conference Finals, when they get to who we assume is going to be the Cavs, they may be a little tired. They may be a little worn down. This may have been a couple 6-game series, and going that deep in the playoffs is something that this team may not be used to. So I get the sense, Julian, that the Sixers, they may get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they may have some tired legs once they face LeBron.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do have the Sixers in the conference finals. I just think the Heat, the talent ultimately there, they win. And then whether it's Milwaukee or Boston, probably a great series either way, but I do think Philly has what it takes to pull that out. They're just getting kind of fortunate with that second-round matchup either way that it falls. But once they get there, I don't even know if it's necessarily going to be tired legs, although it very well could be. A lot of these kids haven't played. They're just getting used to the 82-game schedule, right, let alone getting these playoff games in. But again, it comes down to the talent, and Philly just had that amazing win over the Cavs just about a week ago. But LeBron, obviously, to blow that, whatever it was, 30-point lead, let LeBron come back and have that 44, 11, and 11, I think it was. That just showed when LeBron flips that switch, he's going to be able to get it going against that team. And, I mean, I know it would be a fun run for Philly to finally, trust the process, get into the postseason, and make it to the NBA Finals. But I think a conference final run for Philly would be kind of like a huge stepping point for them, just in terms of getting their feet wet. And then we'll see what happens next season, where LeBron, I think Cleveland will be right back in the finals this year. Playoff LeBron, he'll find a way to get there. But after this season, we'll see where LeBron goes. And if Philly has, conference final experience under their belt. That's going to be great for them moving forward.
Flipping over to the Western Conference, some very interesting matchups. I want to start with the Pelicans and the Blazers because, look, to me, I think Anthony Davis should be a candidate for MVP. He's more than a matchup nightmare. He's a guy who's carried this team, and his supporting cast is a little underrated. Rondo's had a good season. Drew Holiday has played well. Moore has chipped in and has some good games at times. I think the Pelicans can make this a series with the Blazers, even though I like the Blazers to move on. I think Davis is such a unique monster that I think that the Pelicans could win a game or two in this series.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really exciting series. So much star power at the top: Damian Lillard, Anthony Davis. I like a lot of your input there. The one thing I'm a little shaky on, which is why I'm going with the Blazers, I know you are too. Anthony Davis's supporting cast, it's just not that great. I hear what you're saying. Drew Holiday is a really good player. Rajon Rondo typically steps it up in the playoffs. People forget he had the Bulls up 2-0 on the Celtics last year before he got injured. Then the Celtics went on to win 4 games in a row against that team. So Rondo was balling out in the playoffs last season, and he's still capable of that. He still shows big games from time to time. So the Pelicans, I think they're going to put up a good fight. Nobody has an answer for Anthony Davis. He's going to probably have some monster games there, and those will be the games that New Orleans will wind up winning. But in the end, I like how the Blazers are set up. The Pelicans are one of the worst teams in the NBA defensively against guards. That duo of Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, that's going to be pretty tough. Nurkic is a tough guy down on the glass, and then they're just a deeper team than the Pelicans. I just can't get over the fact, the Pelicans are starting E'Twaun Moore, who's a guy that was drafted in the second round to be a point guard, shooting guard. They're starting him really undersized at the small forward position. I just don't think from top to bottom that the Pelicans are able to win that series, but I do think it'll be an exciting one, even though I have the Blazers.
Spurs versus Warriors, which can hear game one today here on 97.3 ESPN. If you compare roster for roster, look, the Warriors have the better team. I mean, they got Kevin Durant. Even without Steph Curry, the Warriors just have such a deep team. But is there a part of you, Julian, that wonders the Spurs may be able to grind out a couple wins just because they can play such good defense?
There is not a part of me that wonders that, unfortunately. I would love to see, the Warriors look weak or something, but even without Steph Curry, I think this is going to be either a sweep, maybe 5 games.
Wow.
Spurs grind one out at home, but then the Warriors come back and get them in 5 at home. It would be great if it were different. It would be great if Kawhi Leonard was out there to change my mind, but without Kawhi Leonard, look, people that want to talk down about the Warriors, I get it. They lost a lot of games this year, but when the switch goes on in the playoffs, and we've seen Curry be out in the playoffs before and come back and just turn right back into the same thing and keep the Warriors going. So I think when Curry comes back in the second round, that's going to be, a great boost for them. They're still the Warriors. They still have that same talent that can't be matched by any other team in the league. So until I need to see it, I need to see them look weak in a postseason series before I can pick against them.
An interesting series in the Western Conference is going to be the Thunder versus the Jazz, 2 very different teams. The Thunder got Westbrook and that offensive guys like Paul George, and you hope Carmelo Anthony shows up in the postseason. Meanwhile, the Jazz play really good defense. Quinn Snyder should be considered one of the coaches of the year candidates. Mitchell's had a great season. Rubio's had a resurgence. Rudy Gobert is still a defensive force. How do you see this series playing out?
Yeah, this is going to be a fun series. This is probably as tight as it gets. I know Boston and Milwaukee, probably my hardest series to pick, but this one is, the 2 teams finished with identical records, and they're both essentially at full strength. So this is what you want to see in the playoffs. This is going to be a very good matchup. In the end, the same theme that I've been going with kind of throughout this is just you go with the talent, and that's obviously with OKC. But I think this is going to be a 7-game series. I think the Thunder will get it done at home in a Game 7. But obviously it's going to be very, very fun. Let's see what Donovan Mitchell can do on this big stage. Rudy Gobert and Steven Adams going at it on the low block. That's going to be a crucial matchup right there. But just all that perimeter scoring, Westbrook, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, I think that's going to, in the end, just prove to be too much for Utah, who they were just such big overachievers this season, whereas the Thunder arguably were one of the biggest underachievers given their talent. So in the end, I think OKC can pull this one out.
Do the Timberwolves have any shot in this series against the Rockets?
I don't think so. I would love to see this be, as competitive of a series as it can be. I think from a DraftKings perspective, I think these are going to be terrific fantasy games, up and down games with a lot of, really attractive fantasy targets. But from a basketball perspective, Minnesota is definitely talented enough to get a game, but Tom Thibodeau likes to slow things down in general, and probably even more so in the postseason. And there's just no slowing the Rockets down. If the Rockets want to go fast, they're going to go fast. So maybe we'll see Minnesota speed up some, but they're obviously not going to be able to beat the Rockets at their own game either. So I think Rockets in 5 is probably where I'm leaning on that series.
Is it fair to assume we're going to have a Warriors-Rockets collision course? And if so, who do you give the edge to?
That's going to be fun, and that might be the best series in the playoffs. I told you when we talked about the Warriors that the Warriors still are the Warriors. They still have that talent discrepancy there where they are just better than everyone. So I know Houston's a trendy pick in the West. I know Toronto's a trendy pick in the East. They are the 1 seeds for a reason, obviously. But I've still got Golden State versus Cleveland again. I know it's boring. I know it's 4 years in a row. I wish I could give you a hot take here and pull 2 other teams out of a hat, but I can't. Those are the 2 teams that just have what it takes to get there. I think this is the last year that we will see Golden State and Cleveland meet in the finals, but I do think it's going to happen one more time. LeBron just knows his way through the Eastern Conference like the back of his hand, and the Warriors are just too talented. It's going to be a heck of a series against the Rockets. I can't wait for it, but I still like the Golden State Warriors there.
He is Julian Edlow joining us today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at Julian Edlow, DraftKings NBA contributor. Julian, before I let you go again, tell the audience one more time about how the DraftKings playoff edition works for them.
Yeah, well, just because your fantasy basketball season is over, it does not mean you have to stop playing fantasy hoops. We're going to have it all for you on DraftKings starting today with this Saturday 3 p.m. 4-game slate. We'll have a same 4-game slate for you with those games on Sunday. And then just each night, whether it be 2, 3 playoff games that are on the board, we're going to have slates for you. Obviously, it's a little bit different than the regular season where you have all these value plays due to injuries and guys resting and whatnot. Now you got to target your value differently, but it's still fun to be out there playing fantasy hoops, and we're going to have you covered all postseason long.
Julian, appreciate the time here on Saturday. Enjoy the games this weekend.
All right. Thanks, Josh. You too.